Oh yeah, we're live. Hey everyone.
That was a lot easier than it usually is.
Yeah.
Wow, so much more efficient.
Yeah,
Boom.
we went live before Amber was on screen. All right, welcome back, Amber. And welcome to everybody who's out there in the listening audience. My name is Mark DeFrancia, and I'm the founder of really.
Yeah, continue.
Yeah.
Let's not leave yet.
Yeah, so my name is Mark DeFrancia. I'm the founder of Creative Self Mastery, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Stan Fisher, Jessica Rueger, Meehir Patel, Linda Bayer, and Amber Corinne. And we're here today live across several platforms now. And I'm proud to say we are officially a podcast across all of the major podcast platforms. Where these episodes are now, some of the historic episodes are already up. The ones that we're producing currently go up immediately, and so you can access us. Looking, you can search "Being the Pace Car" and pretty much find us anywhere. So, and what is the Pace Car? Well, it's a conversation that started over a year ago about being a leader. Pace cars set the pace for the race, and we're looking, and leaders set the pace for their communities, whether that's their homes, whether that's their businesses, whether that's within their tribes and their communities. Pace cars are leaders, and for over the last year or so, we have been doing these pace car conversations, giving people various skills that will help them lead effectively, lead functionally, lead consciously. And so we've talked about a lot of things over the last year, including the elections, holidays, lots of COVID talk back in the beginning, and relationships. But this time we're talking about being the pace car in the bedroom. Now, we did this conversation a couple of weeks ago, and it didn't exactly go as well as we had hoped it would. The conversation itself was fine. It was just that we were having it mainly with ourselves, because a lot of our regular membership, the people who come to these conversations on a regular basis, did not get involved. People chose not to get involved. The subject was too, wait for it, taboo, too dangerous, too scary. I will be judged if I am part of something like this. It's unseemly to talk about sex. Is it? Because that's what we're here to talk about today. Why is it so unseemly to talk about sex when sex is such an important part of everything, every part of our lives? We wouldn't exist if it weren't for sex. Yeah, we wouldn't exist. Sex is the primary creative force, in the universe. Well, we can't say in the universe because we don't know what the universe is like, but certainly on this planet, certainly in this realm, sex is one of the primary creative forces. Yeah, if not the largest and most predominant creative force. And we can't talk about it. That seems like a gaping incongruity. It seems like there's something there. So we said, well, let's go see what's there. And we lifted up the rock and we looked underneath it, and lo and behold, nobody was there, because nobody wanted to talk about it, because everybody was too uncomfortable, including some of the people on the panel. I think we all came in with the best of intentions, but once I started talking and using words like fuck up against a tree, people started to shut down, getting nervous, like, oh my God, what if somebody in my family hears this? You know, what if people judge me because I'm part of such a crass conversation? And as a result, things, you know, the conversation, we pulled punches. Well, I'm not going to say I pulled a punch. I'm going to say the audience pulled punches. They were too nervous to get involved in an honest conversation. And a lot of, surprisingly, like this was the part that made me laugh the most, was that a lot of our people, regulars who appear on camera, now, mind you, you don't see them, but we see them. A lot of them that come into the Zoom room and appear on camera as a participant, or I'm sorry, as an attendee, didn't do that. Where did they go? Like, they did participate, but where did they go? They went to Facebook Live and audited from Facebook Live, so that nobody, like, there was no way in God's world that they could be associated with this vile and, you know, horrible subject that we were attempting to discuss. But here's the thing, guys, if you can't talk about sex, then you can't be an effective pace car in any aspect of your life. If you can't have the difficult conversations, you cannot lead. And if you cannot have difficult conversation, you know, sex is a conversation that can be quite difficult for people. If you can't master yourself in the face of that, then you won't be able to lead effectively. Now, why, you know, is it that important to lead effectively in the bedroom? Well, yes, because the way you lead in the bedroom is the way you lead everywhere. If you are the type of person who doesn't feel comfortable talking about sex, there's going to be other things you're not going to be comfortable talking about either. If you pull your punches when you talk about sex, then chances are you're going to pull your punches when confronted with some other uncomfortable topic. And so we've decided to do it again, where it's a redo, not necessarily, but it is. We're going to see if we can't get to the bottom of some of this taboo, the taboo that is sex, and get to the bottom of why it's so difficult to talk about, in hopes that we can move the conversation into something more productive, into giving people options for ways to be more expressive, more communicative, and to get what they want, not only out of their sex life, but out of the other aspects of their lives as well. Cool. So we went live and we started talking. And see, now we've got some of our people coming in. It's very nice to see the people coming back into the room today, after being noticeably absent last time. So it's lovely to see you folks back in the attendees room. Thanks for coming. Thanks for for supporting us. And please, please, please do add to the conversation. Same thing for you folks out there, in live land, wherever live land happens to be. You can communicate directly with the panelists. We are monitoring what the communication. So if there's something that you want to express, if you want to give your viewpoint, if you want to say, you're a horrible, vile human being and you need to be removed from every live platform that ever existed, you can say that too. I'll be happy to hear you say something. So let's get into the conversation. Why is it so taboo? Why can we not talk about sex? Anybody want to? Oh, here we go. Yes, I'm going to put you in as Rebecca. Rebecca. Oh well, I got look. I got other people want to talk now. But yes, we'll get to the coaches. Rebecca, why is sex such a taboo subject for you? need to unmute
She
yourself.
muted.
You need to unmute yourself, Rebecca.
You mute.
Rebecca is struggling. Okay. Well, then we'll go back to the coaches. Coaches, why is sex such a taboo subject for you? Stanley, you got your hands up.
So for me, the fear that comes up in this platform of being on a live stream is the judgment of my family, because I was raised with the belief that I shouldn't have sex until I was married. And I've had lots of sex out of marriage. And I don't want them to know. Or at least, you know, even though they already know.
Well, let's be more honest about that. You come from a specific religious background, yes?
Christian, yes.
Yeah, Christian background. And it's a sin to
Yeah.
have sex before marriage.
Yes.
So talking about the fact that you've had sex before marriage must be, I don't know, do they have, I'm Catholic, we have grades of sin, you know? So like, is it like, do the Christians have grades of sin, or is it all just equally simple?
If there is, I don't know anything about it. That's nothing I was taught. I just heard it was bad. It was really bad.
Yeah, it's really bad. Don't talk about it. Don't have sex.
That's on one side of the family. The other side of the family, everyone was having sex and everyone had kids. And so I got hit there too, that I was going to get a bunch of women pregnant. And so there was fear there too. And so no matter where I went, there was judgment and ridicule for sex everywhere.
Yeah. You know, who actually, you know, all kidding aside, who's experienced that? Who feels that, you know, within their own family, even there has been judgment around them, around sex, their interest in sex, you know, the whether sex is an acceptable thing, all of that. You know, we all have, right? God, I grew up in an Italian Catholic family. You know, my mother was on, you know, was on the Catholic Women's Club. I mean, you know, we used to have Monsignor over for dinner on Sundays occasionally. That was the house I was raised in. And I, in case you haven't noticed, am a homosexual. And so, you know, it's bad enough that that I'm a, you know, a randy teenage boy. I'm also a randy homosexual teenage boy. So I'm getting messages from my group, my inner circle at that point, my parents and my clergy, that I am an abomination, not just something, you know, potentially sinful or whatever. In God's eyes, I'm an abomination, you know? So, yeah. So of course, conversation is going to get a little covert when it comes to sex. Yeah. Who else? Why else? Religious conditioning, certainly a reason why sex is very taboo. Why else is sex a taboo subject?
I remember one of the first messages I got, it must have been about my son's age. So he's 8. I was 7 or 8 years old and I was wearing short shorts. And I remember hearing my mother say, "You're going to get raped wearing your shorts that short." And I didn't even know what rape was, but I assumed it meant sex. And then I blushed and thought that was funny. And then I got reprimanded for that. That was a pretty early message for me.
So you got the message that sex is dangerous, and that you're already, you know, geared for some sort of sexual catastrophe at 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
9 years old.
8 or 9, maybe 7 or 8. Yeah. And so it was so stunning and shocking to me that I'm not even really clear all the messages that I got from that one, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But that I was responsible. Somehow something was wrong with me. I definitely got that. Something was wrong with me and I better put that in check.
Something's wrong with you, but you don't even know what sex is at that age. And yet they're already telling you that something's wrong with you it boggles the mind. I think, we talk about agreements all the time, right? I'm a big fan of Don Miguel Ruiz, and I love the book, The Four Agreements. If you haven't read it, please do the world a favor and read that book. But he talks about how he says domesticated. It's how we're conditioned, and how we create our values. And he calls them agreements. I call them beliefs. We talk about this a lot. The fact that these young brains, 3.5, 4 years old, are making agreements with themselves about the way the world is when they can't even understand anything outside of the small realm that they live in. But, parents say, no, that's bad, and they agree. Parents say, you're bad if, and we agree. And even if the parents aren't telling us that there's something wrong with us, we in our little monkey minds are twisting things around and deciding that there's something wrong because we're trying to make sense of a world that we can't possibly make sense of at that age. We're young brains trying to live in an adult world. Of course we're getting it wrong. Of course we're not understanding things properly. Of course we're making agreements with ourselves that are not based in any fact whatsoever. But that's what we do. We make these agreements. And then from about age 5 on, we start to reinforce those agreements. We start to look for proof that those things that we've agreed to with ourselves is the truth. And we find it because we always prove our beliefs, always. And so if we decide that something is a certain way, we believe it. We have, to us, we have tons and tons of proof. And Stanley's parents, Stanley's family, they have tons and tons of proof that Christian values are the values and the only values. They have tons of proof. Their beliefs are the only viable beliefs on the planet, and they've got tons of proof that that's the case. And anybody who can't see it their way, too bad, you lose, you go to hell. Because you don't get it. Amber.
We've got a comment from Facebook. We've got somebody sharing that sex is taboo for them because Hollywood creates a false normal and they're comparing themselves and their sex life to what is portrayed in Hollywood in movies and the media. And so when you talk about that, your sex and your desires, and it doesn't match up with what you see in the media, then you fear that it's not normal.
Well, that's a good point. Of all the ways that that we make agreements with ourselves, even as adults, we do have granted it's been changing over the last decade or so, but really we get very specific messages about what sexy is, and how sexy should be portrayed. And if you don't look like a Barbie doll, or if you don't look like a Ken doll, then somehow, you're not sexy, or you're not entitled to the same type of sex that you're seeing on screen. We make all sorts of agreements with ourselves based on what we see in movies, and based on our role models, and also based on the things that we interact with, the other things that we interact with, like our toys. There's probably not a woman within earshot that isn't going to say that on some level she didn't feel inadequate next to her Barbie doll. Yeah. Anybody on my panel want to nod? I see Amber nodding. Ladies?
I wasn't allowed to have Barbies.
You weren't allowed to have Barbies. Yes, because they were sinful and dirty.
I had the knockoff Barbies that
They were
still
too
didn't
sexy.
They were too sexy. Linda?
I would just like to share that last time during the conversation, I felt very intimidated with the conversation, and I felt like I froze. And reflecting on why I froze, I would say because I felt somewhat inadequate to have the conversation. I started to write stories about, okay, so I'm not in a relationship right now, so I can't really speak on the subject. I didn't realize that I could contribute and be of service to everybody that's listening by just stating where I was and how I felt. So I have been married twice, and the experience in the bedroom, the sexual experience that I had with both of those men were very different. And I would say the difference was, I have to admit, I don't know that I was the pace car in either of those relationships, but one of the men definitely was a pace car and very, and had direct communication. So like for me, it's one thing to have the discussion on sex. It's another thing to then in the moment be the pace car and have the vulnerability to tell my partner what it is that I like, what I would want, what my needs are. So, but I will say that one partner I had was very much a pace car in the way that I felt comfortable. I felt very comfortable. And I realized that in that was the first marriage. The second marriage, had I had direct communication in the bedroom, I would have had direct communication in other areas of our life. And perhaps I would have been able to have a voice to say certain things that I would have a stronger yes and a stronger no in other areas. I mean, even in the kitchen, a stronger yes and a stronger no. Where are you going to go? Where do you want to go for dinner? A stronger yes and a stronger, there's the gray area in between, but raising children, I would have had a more pace car voice, which is not a domineering my way or the highway voice, but a voice of saying, a voice of stating what's important to me and speaking from my heart, rather than when it got difficult, like say even in the kitchen or out with friends or in any situation outside of the bedroom, it got difficult. I didn't have the voice to speak my truth. So taking all of that into consideration, my next relationship, we will see. I'll have we shall see. I'll have the intention of, and at least I have the realization that the importance of communicating in the bedroom and how that moves in the vulnerability. And how if I'm looking for intimacy and if I want connection, I have to be a part of it. It's not a one-way, it's not one person it's two people. So if I want the relationship, I'm going to have to speak. I'm going to have to speak up. I'm going to have to speak my truth and share.
Okay, and agreed. And that Linda, when Linda's talking about direct communication, she's actually talking about something we discussed in the last episode, and we will touch on it again in a moment. But but what we were saying is that if you can't communicate effectively, you can't lead effectively. And Linda basically froze last episode. She really just couldn't bring herself to talk about it. Why, Linda? Why? What was it? There was, it's taboo for you as well. We've talked about, we've talked about culture. We've talked about, religion. We've talked about programming. Why is it taboo for you?
There may be something about childhood, like we were talking about, like Jessica was saying. good girls, like don't have sex. I mean, and when you get married and you don't talk about it. And you don't really have needs, you like, and my mom, she's passed away, and she was fabulous mother, fabulous. But her way of handling things when it got like anything was heated, you just smile, dress up, put your makeup on, make a nice dinner for them. You just make a nice dinner and everything's going to be okay. Well, it didn't work for me that way, but I think like the good girl thing, and then I thought, well, gosh, maybe I'm a different generation. I was all these stories played in my head. I was like making up stuff as I sat there. You couldn't tell, but my arms were crossed, my legs were crossed, and I was quite leaning out rather than leaning in. And I just kept looking at the clock on my computer to see how can I get through this. Can I get through this? So this time I'm committed to participating a little bit more fully in the event that there's somebody that I can be of service to on the call that grew up, with similar uncomfortableness. As I've gotten older, I've loosened up a little bit. But there's still some younger programming when we got on the call last time, all that younger programming. I was a teenage girl again, not supposed to say or do, I just froze, absolutely froze. So this time I'm just like unfreezing myself and participating.
Well, it's great. And I appreciate that, that you're mastering yourself in order to serve other people. Because face it, this is a difficult conversation no matter what. Linda, let me just ask you, it's for the panel, it's for the listening audience as well. Were you taught in any way, shape, or form that sex was something that should be enjoyed?
No, not that it was pleasurable, not that it was something where I could ask for what I liked. There really wasn't any information around the fact that it could be enjoyable for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, there was sex education at the time for me. There was no sex education around being gay, and sex education at the time was very much, the biology of having sex. But I never got a message that ever, even now in today's society, I do not get messages frequently that say to me that it's okay to enjoy a gay sex life. I get it from my community, but I do not get it from the world at large. I can walk a quarter of a mile down the road and be called a fucking queer in Western North Carolina. Sad but true. But again, if I'm not safe, walking down the street, if somebody can assault me and call me a queer, Jesus, how would I possibly ever get a message that gay sex was safe or safe, never mind something to be enjoyed. And then don't forget, I came out during the AIDS epidemic. So I got another message that said, sex is completely unsafe. And it's not something that, is supposed to be enjoyed. It's a life-threatening thing. It's dangerous. Luckily, at the time, and probably still, I don't know, there was a lot of promiscuity in the gay community. It was the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, and there was a lot of promiscuity still. So I did get information in my 20s that sex was okay to enjoy, and even how to enjoy it. But again, I got that as an adult. My messages my programming was already well in place. So who else was told that sex was not supposed to be enjoyable? Amber?
So,
Go ahead, Amber. I'll share afterwards.
well, hearing Stanley share his upbringing, it is really funny because it reminds me a lot of mine. I have a very large family and raised Roman Catholic and then Christian, like kind of respectively on each side. And I have some lovely cousins. I love them so much. And they ended up, each of them, 4 of them, ended up getting pregnant and dropping out of high school. And so as it was happening to each one, and I love my extended cousins as well, there would be prayers and prayer circles for people to try and keep their legs closed. It was really intense. And I remember the oldest, they're quite a bit older than me. And I was like 3 or 4, and like, I didn't know what sex was, but I knew that it was an issue and that it caused babies, and that like people continued to like have these situations. And so there was a lot of intensity around the effects that it would have. So there was nothing about the pleasure, it was about the effects. And it made it really, really curious. I formed a lot of beliefs at a very young age as to why, what it was, what it meant, how bad it was, how sinful it was, the whole gamut of the situation. And it took a long time to kind of unpack that. It took a very long time to unpack that and to try and start to build my own connection, my own like understanding relationship, my own like ability to have sex or have some sort of like understanding of like what sex meant to me, and to kind of start to let go of and unpack all of the different beliefs and all the different ideas that I had been fed as a small child around what it was supposed to be.
All right, so you know, in a world where we struggle to find things in common, it seems that almost universally everybody in, you know, that's in this room anyway, has something in common, where we were all sent messages that it's unsafe or unsavory or just plain wrong to talk about sex. So, okay, so we understand, you know, some of the taboo nature. Is there anybody, Nikki, I saw that you had your hand up. Did you want to add something to, you know, to why sex is taboo for you?
Yeah, well, I was just going to share, yeah, why it was taboo for me, what I believe anyway. So for example, when I was younger, I developed very quickly at quite a young age. I mean, I'm tall anyway. And then when I was probably still only about 10, I had my growth spurt. And so I always looked, pretty much from the age of 10, I always looked much older than I was. And I started to become aware that I was sexually attractive to men. And I was, at that time though, it was a problem because I was still, you know, I was immature. I was still too young to kind of have that understanding to, yeah, I wasn't ready for it. And I kind of think that maybe the taboo for me is that my first experiences of any form of me being sexually attractive or sex in general was that it gave me a feeling of discomfort, because I didn't feel comfortable with the attention that I was getting. I didn't really understand why, you know, it was not something that I actually come from a family which was very open, and, you know, they would be very accepting and very open to talking about whatever. They wouldn't tell me that sex was wrong or not pleasurable or anything. They just didn't talk about it. So that was probably more my issue there. But yeah, just the taboo for me probably comes from just my first experiences of anything remotely sex related was associated with feelings of discomfort, because I was too young to, you know, to have started to become sexually attractive and to become, you know, join that realm. And so, yeah, men's attention made me feel uncomfortable.
Wow, that's a good, not a good one, Nikki, sorry. That's a great contribution.
Glad it served somewhere.
Yeah, that's a great contribution. Thank you, Nikki. Again, keep them coming, folks. I really want people to have, you know, an understanding that because I'm sure what you put out there, somebody in the listening audience is going to be like, yep, that was mine. Michelle, what about you?
Unmute yourself, Michelle.
Mute yourself, Michelle.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I got kind of mixed messages when growing up. Like Mark and Amber had the Catholic upbringing, and grandparents on both sides who were from, much older generations. But I had parents that were young and silly and crazy in love when I was born, when I was little. And I just remember them being so affectionate with one another. And it's to the point where it was kind of like, oh God, they're kissing again, that kind of thing. But by the same token, as I got older, the other messages that kind of got blended in with that was that you had to be a good girl, or even like, sitting in church on Sundays, you had to keep your legs together and sit like a lady. And I will say, between me being the oldest child and the younger siblings that came along, parenting got really different as the years went on. But to begin with, there was this real uptightness. And there was also something that was, I think, more designated to me, that connected with as older generations as well, is that when my parents had me, or when my parents got pregnant with me, they were not married. They were young and crazy in love, and I think engaged. And by today's standards, it would be a total non-entity. But back then, it really was. And I think the greatest toll that it took was on my mother. And so she was kind of, harsh on me. I remember wanting to get jeans as a teenager, and, it was like wearing jeans was equal to being a slut or a barfly or something. I don't know. And it's it was just kind of confusing. It was just all odd. And, but then getting older, realizing what societal norms had been put on her, and I got to kind of be, the recipient of some of that. And then I was expected to be a very good girl. And I think was kind of naive for a long time as well. And so I just always tried to be a very good girl.
Mhm.
And then the other thing I'll say on this is that Robin Williams once said that the problem with America in general, and I think this pertains to sex as well, is that we were founded by Puritans, the only people uptight enough to get kicked out by the British. No offense to our British friends on the call.
That's why I love it, because I know how many Brits are listening, and I'm just like, yes.
No offense.
It's accurate. It's pretty accurate.
It's accurate. It's funny because it's true. Yeah.
And the way Robin Williams said it, it was just perfect. And anytime America just kind of F's up on anything, I'm just like, yep, that's why. So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Michelle. That, I think that is, again, good girls don't have sex. And if good girls don't have sex, then good girls don't talk about sex either. Now, look, we all know that we talk about sex a lot. I know that, that the people on the panel, they may not be willing to talk about, sex, their sex lives, live on Facebook or YouTube or God knows what other platforms. But I'm sure, in private conversations, that's a different story. And I mean, I know for a fact in some cases, because I've had those conversations. But I will say that out of all of the conversations, I've known some of these people for a long time. Out of all of the conversations that I've had, the least number of conversations I've ever had with any one given person has been about sex. Just don't talk about it. Meehir, you had your hand up earlier.
Yes.
Something you want to contribute?
I can't remember what I was going to say back then, but it's interesting because I know you guys know me differently. I would think so, but if there was such a thing as a good boy, that would have been me. In my household, there was a deep sense of denial around sex and sexuality. And like as kids, we'll be watching a movie with our parents, and if there's anything that's either, implies intercourse or really, or really sort of intense kissing, right? It'd be like, change the channel, change the channel, change the channel, right? And I never really got it, right? But what I made up about it was, clearly something's wrong here, and we're not supposed to see it, right? Because I know me and you haven't had this conversation, because I don't think it's had too much an effect, but I think what I did was, because look, we all get curious at some point, and I think the moment I got the internet at home, the first thing I did is look up porn. Like, I was about 12 years old, about 12, maybe 13. We got the internet, and that was the first place I went. And obviously it was just like, because I see naked bodies on like the TV and whatever, but then, the channels are changed. And then in secret, I'll watch like sex scenes that, that I knew that were in the films that my parents had recorded. That's kind of the shit that was going on. I do a lot of stuff because I'm just like so curious. And I could tell, now I can say, looking back, that my sexual curiosity was starting to take form. But one of the things I guess I made up, that this is something that has to be kept a secret. It's, you don't talk about it. And I, as a result, like, that's one side of me that I never really kind of talked about or revealed. And even amongst my friends, like, I knew they were talking about it. They seemed to have I assumed that they had a different experience around their sexual narrative anyway. So they were comfortable. They were like dating girls, and they were talking about, doing whatever with girls and all that kind of stuff. And for me, that was completely alien. Like, I didn't have my first girlfriend until 19, right? That's how sort of a good boy I was. I was so shy in that sense. Like, and she was the first woman that I had any sort of sexual experiences with. And even with her, we didn't have intercourse, right? We had a 3-year relationship. And we didn't even have intercourse. And when I actually wanted to take the relationship to the next level, it rather than it being something that we're curious about, it became a conflict, became a conflict of interest. And eventually the relationship ended. And I didn't want to be, I like to think that was the least important thing at that point, because our relationship was kind of showing cracks in other areas anyway. But I think even in Asian community, you like being raised in an Indian, you don't really talk about it. Like, even as a Christian say it's a bad and it's an abomination, in Indian culture, you don't talk about it. Like, it's just, you wake up one day and you have babies, right? That's kind of the kind of thing you make up. And, my parents were, one time I was cleaning their room. I was vacuuming, and I must have moved the bed slightly. They had a divan bed, and I saw condoms on the floor. I was like, oh, I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? And I didn't know what to make of it. I wasn't weirded out, so I was like, okay, cool, this is kind of normal. But the thing was, we had no education around it, and I think me and also my sisters, we kind of had to just go and discover on our own. And I used porn as my teacher. I have to be honest, like, that really informed me. And then I mentioned last time on the conversation that it was about performance. And that's what I made up about pornography. Like, sex is about performance. It has to look good. And if she's making loud noises and there's a lot of DNA everywhere, right? So, like that's a good thing, it's really theatrical and all that kind of stuff. Not realizing I had a complete sort of skewed view of what it was. And look, and I'm not going to say the age, but it took me a long time to lose my virginity. It really, really did. Because even when I would have relationships with some women, like, I couldn't just have sex with them. Like, I couldn't be completely physical about it. Like, I've never been wired that way. So I had to have a bit of a connection. And, you know, I wasn't, you know, I would never have the experience where it'd be a one night stand or anything like that. I've never had one. I don't intend on having those. So, you know, that was kind of been my experience. So, you know, I've kind of, but it's always been because I always thought I'm going to have sex with the woman. The first woman I'm going to meet is the woman I'm going to have sex with. And, you know, and we're both going to be virgins and we're going to just live together and be happily married ever after. That's how idealistic I used to think. And then I had a bit of a reality check. So that's kind of been my journey. And always, I do want to talk about this at some point, but even like recently, I had probably my most sort of, you know, one of the best sexual experiences in a relationship that I've ever had in my most recent relationship. But I also had challenges there around the, you know, what we talked about in our conversations, Mark, about the Madonna whore complex. Like, I love this person and I can't see them and experience them as a sexual being. And it really freaked me out for a little while. Like, it really, for a good few months, I couldn't, you know, obviously we did, but it was, you know, it was difficult for me to get erotic and lustful and all these kind of things. I had to kind of reconcile the two eventually. And eventually I was able to, but it's quite a challenging, you know, it was quite a challenging experience too.
Yeah, we got there in the end, yeah.
Yeah, we did, for sure.
But it was a lot of programming to undo.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And that's really what we're talking about. You know, basically, yeah, we've all, for any number of reasons, we've all been programmed to not talk about it, to think it's dirt. You know, we haven't even hit that one yet. But okay, Amber first. Amber,
I just kind of wanted to share a little bit of my journey. I got out of the house as soon as I could. I went to university as soon as I graduated, and made a fantastic group of friends. And they happened to be very open about sex, like not in like a polyamorous way. I don't think that existed back then. Well, it wasn't talked about, but but they would just like, we had very interesting dialogue around it, and sharing of our experiences. And I started to learn that there was more to sex than just making sure the guy had an orgasm. And my experience, as I learned to communicate more directly around that in many parts of my life, I went from being that person who was similar to Meehir, making sure I'm doing it right, like looking up, like, what are the techniques, like where am I supposed to put my hands, like how am I supposed to move, all of that stuff, into saying no if I wasn't in the mood to my boyfriend, or like just flat out, you know, bringing something up if I wanted to have a more specific experience. And it was very much a long transition. It took a long time for me to get all of that Catholic programming out of my subconscious. And it's probably still there on some level, but now when I start to experience like a resistance, if I hear something or somebody shares like an experience they've had, or a fantasy that they enjoy, and I start to hear that, if I notice that there's any type of a twang or any type of judgment that comes up, I'm noticing, oh, well, that's just my programming. And I can come and approach it from a much more open standpoint, from much more curious standpoint, where I'm able to now look at it from, that is a fantastic new experience that I've never known someone could have, instead of coming from it from the lens of my conditioning. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to share that, like, it did take a long time for me to be able to talk about it. And here now I am talking about it on Facebook. But I feel like, you know, it's once you kind of pull the lid off of it, you open up that box and shine the light in. Everybody who says they don't enjoy sex, that's up to you. Like, that's totally on you. If you don't want to enjoy it, that's fine too. But there is the component that it does create a deeper sense of intimacy, and you can have intimacy without being sexual, but you also can deepen your intimacy with being sexual. And it does come down to really communicating where you're at, what feels good to you, where you'd like to take the other person, or where you'd like them to go, and to kind of approach it from that perspective instead of tiptoeing around it. I don't know how many times I would like reposition myself to try and like get my partner to like be in a certain area or something like that, instead of just directly saying, here's what I need right now. And it's so freeing and so much more relaxing to actually be able to communicate without having that stigma or without having that that worry that you're coming across being too bossy or too slutty or any of that stuff. Like, I don't walk down the street needing to share my sex life, but when I am with my boyfriend, I do have that ability to speak up and talk about it now.
All right, let's move the conversation to that then, because the reality is that that you would be in the minority for that.
I am. Yeah, I am in the minority.
Sex is dirty, plain and simple. It's dirty, according to everybody. Everybody who's spoken today. The subtext on all of this is sex is dirty. Sex is a bad thing. It's not something that we're not supposed to talk about. We're not supposed to enjoy. It's dirty.
And to be done in secret, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. It should be done in secret. We shouldn't talk about it. But here's,
and as Rebecca is saying, possibly dangerous as well.
Yeah, and dangerous and all that. But okay, so we've established why it's taboo and why we don't feel comfortable talking about it. But let's talk about the knock-on effect of that now, because what happens to those of us who give into our programming during sex? Interesting, right? You hear the male perspective. It's all about, I'm supposed to please my woman. You hear the female perspective. It's all about, I'm supposed to please my man. What's happening? Two people, doesn't matter their gender, in a sexual situation, having dialogue in their head about what's happening, about what should be happening, about the way it should be happening. And we all know that if we're dialoguing in our head, we are certainly not connecting to the other person. You can't be dialoguing with ego and connecting from your heart at the same time. It just doesn't work that way. And we'll talk it in terms of what we want to accomplish by having sex. If our goal is to satisfy our partner, but we can't connect to them because we're too busy thinking, then how the fuck are we ever going to satisfy our partners, right? And so it's that inner dialogue. Sex is something to be ashamed of. And if you like sex, you should feel guilty about that. Guilt and shame are designed to separate. Follow the bouncing ball. You're conditioned to be ashamed of sex. You're conditioned to feel guilty if you like it. And that creates separation in the bedroom. It creates separation in the sexual relationship. Because if you're having a dialogue with yourself, you're not connecting. Who here, I'd like to see hands in the audience as well. Who here can honestly say that they have completely missed the point of a sexual encounter because they were too in their head, or that they had a really awful sexual encounter with somebody because that person was way too much in their head? Hands? Yeah. I definitely know, that in my early days, I wasn't a good boy. So I had a lot of experiences. Not some in my teens, but those were with women. When I started sleeping with men at 22 years old, I think. And I had, in the beginning, it was all dialogue all the time. I couldn't connect to anybody. I was too busy worrying about whether I was doing it right, whether. My big one, my personal big one, I guarantee somebody else has this one too, is how am I being perceived by this person? Yeah, there we go. I knew that.
As growing up, the programming somehow I got, fortunately, I wasn't brought up in any way religious. So I just want to thank you, Mom and Dad, for that.
I have so many friends who will not do the girl on top. I don't even know what the technical name for that is, because of how they'll be perceived from that angle, or
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Like, if you dare to ask for something you want, you know, you're a whore, or in the case of man, you're a filthy pig. You know, men, you know, so many of us got our information around sex from pornography. I don't know about women. I can only speak from the male perspective, but every man every man here will say that, yeah, he learned the majority of his sexual technique from pornography.
I learned how to fake an orgasm from pornography.
There you go.
Yeah, well, and the woman is objectified. It's like there's nothing about the woman being satisfied. She is there to satisfy the man. Any porn that I've seen, she is there as the entertainment, the performer, and the object for a man's pure satisfaction.
I didn't feel comfortable with my direct communication to say I'm not in the mood, or to hurry up, or I'm getting sore, or whatever the heck it is. Instead, I just learned how to fake an orgasm to make it end quicker.
Oh, the dreaded faked orgasm. Yeah, all brains that are old enough go to when Harry Met Sally and Meg Ryan faking an orgasm at the table.
I never saw that movie. It was off the list when I was growing up.
Oh, of course it was. Of course it was. Because she faked an orgasm at the table. You know, can't be filthy at the table. That's a double whammy.
In a cafe.
But think about it though. You know, Jessica's right. You know, we're taught to objectify. Men are taught to objectify their sex, their sex partner, whether it's male or female. I got to be honest. We're taught to objectify our partner because that's what pornography looks like. And we're also taught that the person that's being objectified, that there's something kind of wrong with them, right? They're not equals. They're not really, they're barely human, because we've objectified them to the point where they're barely human. Certainly, you know, their needs are not important to us. But what about if you're a person who is on the receiving end of sex and you don't think of yourself as being an object? You know, what if you're not comfortable with the idea that you know, that because you're in the passive position, that you are somehow less than? How in your head do you get if you think that your partner is judging you as less than simply because you're engaging in sex with them? You know, like, God, man, it's a minefield. It's amazing anybody has sex at all. If it didn't feel so good, none of us would do it at all, I would imagine.
I agree with you there, because, you know, the thing is, doing it is one thing and talking about it is another.
Yes.
And I can say that I've never known how to talk about it, right? But how to do it, obviously, I've learned what I've learned. And by the time you do it, the tension has built up so much, you just want to resolve your tension around it, right? Whether it's good or bad or not is a different story altogether. You just hope for the best. And then I ask after, was it good? Did you come? How many times? Right? That's usually my protocol, right? And
that like gives me performance anxiety when you say that every time you hear it.
Yeah. Like, yeah, honestly, look, and look, I probably have
a mood changer.
Look, I mean, see, I don't know that. Like, no one's ever communicated that to me. So this has been insightful for me, that in terms of having a conversation pre and post sex is a powerful structure to have. And I know we'll talk about that at some point, but that doesn't exist because the tension is so high. The times I've had when it's mounted to sex is like, the tension is so high that the no talking has gone on at all, right? There might be a little bit of alcohol involved sometimes, right? With a little bit of flirting here and there, but it's not like, you know, we talk about this. How do you want to experience it? What's your end result? Like, what do you like? Like, I didn't even know that until, you know, one woman I was with.
Turn into all clinical. What's your end result?
Yeah. I'm just to illustrate a point more than anything, right? But like, you know, but why can't it be, right? Because there's an assumption made that it needs to be a certain way too. So there's all of these things that, you know, that's going on. As a man, you're thinking, you just got to own the moment. You got to dominate her. You got to sweep her off her feet, you know. So that's kind of what goes on for me. Go ahead, Stan.
And to add on to that, Meehir, what's plagued me is I'm not the same man I was 20 years ago. That drive is totally different today.
Absolutely.
I miss that guy.
Yeah. See, I was 20 years ago, I wasn't doing anything. So, you know, I've had very numerous opportunities that the woman was actually saying, look, I wouldn't mind doing something with you. And I was completely like psyched out by it because of my own shame around it. It's like, well, I'm not dating her. She's not my girlfriend. That's kind of weird to me. Like, I can't do that. I need to have some form of relationship with you in order for me to have sex with you. That's kind of where it's been really tricky for me in recent years. And still, I haven't experienced sex outside of a committed relationship.
Yeah. It's been very difficult to have those conversations with my partners around where I'm at this point in my life, you know, because my partners, as we've both gotten older, their sex drive has gone up. A woman's sex drive has gone up and mine has gone down. And it's made for a very tough conversation in the judgment that I've received.
Interesting. I kind of feel the same way too about my drive kind of going down and me actually looking for something else, what I would class as intimacy. But, you know.
No spoilers.
Yeah.
So in a second. You know, just kind of bringing it back into focus. I'm Italian, and I was raised with the idea that it's the man's job to satisfy his partner. If you don't satisfy your partner, you are not a man. So the majority of my early sexual encounters, there was an endless inner dialogue going on about, you know, are they getting what they need? Are they happy? You know, with men, there's kind of an obvious sign that they're happy, but still, you go on that, and that's another mistake that people make. They go on the outward appearance. Well, we know that women can fake orgasms. You know, in some circumstances, so can men. But the reality is that we're going on appearance, not on dialogue. We're not asking, we're not communicating, we're making assumptions. Another one of Miguel Ruiz's, you know, no-nos, making assumptions. You know, we assume that just because everybody's getting off, that everybody's happy and satisfied. Dangerous assumption. And if you do not have the skills to communicate effectively around this, then you don't know what you don't know, right? And your partner may not be comfortable telling you, because they probably have similar hang-ups around talking about sex. So you know, what's the solution? Direct communication. Now, you've heard us refer to that before. Direct communication is simply, it's something that we use in a lot of the pace car conversations. It really comes down to the concept of speaking with you know, your authentic and vulnerable voice. So it's the willingness to be authentic, in other words, speak your truth, and be vulnerable. Be willing to let it land however it lands and deal with whatever the fallout is. Not very many people employ direct communication. Not many people want to deal with the fallout, you know, of you know, voicing their truth. And a lot of people are just plain not comfortable with voicing their truth in the most simple of situations, never mind something as complex as sex. But if we don't have the ability to communicate honestly and take that chance, that, you know, with that honestly and with vulnerability, then never mind the fact that we're not going to have good sex. We're not going to have intimacy, right? Now, people say, well, I have intimacy with my partner. My sex life is okay, pretty good. There are some things I would like to change, and but for the most part, it's pretty good. But we have intimacy. Well, yeah, you do, I'm sure, have intimacy, but not the type of communication that builds intimacy. Yeah, we all. I mean, if you're partnered with somebody, you have to be able to have some sort of intimacy with them. That's just But nobody's building that. People aren't actively working to build that. When we do team building and leadership workshops, direct communication is a big part of that, because you can't lead if you can't effectively communicate. But you can't be part of a team if there's no intimacy, right? One of the things that we do, is, we do Darkest Secret, because Darkest Secret tends to build intimacy. People share the stuff that they're uncomfortable talking about, and sharing it takes the power out of it, but it also binds the group together, right? That it builds intimacy. Amber.
So in that vein, with direct communication, in order to have direct communication, it's paramount to really have some sort of a destination in mind. You can call it an end result, you can call it a vision, you can call it a goal, whatever you want. An experience, I think, is probably the most comprehensive way of approaching it. But it really starts with knowing what you want, and that starts with knowing where you stand. So if you are still having a lot of questions, if you still have a lot of confusion around some different topics, around your sexuality, around your partners, around just religion, any type of element that plays into your life, because this applies to all areas of life, getting clear on where you stand. And even if you still have some confusion around it, it's okay, but acknowledge that. And then start to look at where you want to go, start to look at the experience that you want to have. So we had a comment on Facebook, what if your partner is not as open? How can you facilitate the conversation for someone who shuts down or is uncomfortable talking about it? And for me personally, I know that with my partner, we do have conversations around it, but initially we didn't. We've been together for multiple years now, but initially we were on very different pages, and I wasn't as comfortable with him because I don't know if a woman can have a Madonna whore syndrome with their boyfriend, but there was some sort of thing where I wanted to keep him not in a friend zone, but I wanted to keep him in a more safe space, because he has the potential. He's a lot bigger than me to be really intense, and he also was picking up on that, and so he didn't want to hurt me or whatnot. But it starts with me wanting to really truly find out and make that connection. What feels good for you? What's safe for you? Let's have a conversation. Maybe it's not when things are starting to get heated. We're going to have a conversation over coffee and starting to open up that dialogue. Hey, here's, what I've been noticing. For me personally, can I find out where you stand on some things, and starting to have that focus on creating that intimate dialogue before you take it into the bedroom, because building some sort of open communication there in a very safe, I don't want to say safe space, but in a very neutral space, is going to make it easier when the emotions and the hormones are starting to elevate. And that's where I would start with that. And that's what has worked for me.
Well, and you bring up a good point. Not everybody who here is actually comfortable speaking during sex. And yeah, it's not my favorite thing to do, I gotta admit.
When it first happened, when a boyfriend years back started talking during sex, I was like, what's happening?
When you mean talking, I mean trying to have a conversation, or dirty talk?
I mean
both.
Yeah, both.
Conversation when I was dirty talking, I'm like, why are you swearing at me? What?
Yeah, both. Both the sex talk, which is posing. That's role playing. But who here actually believes that sex is, well, how can I say this? I guess maybe casual enough an activity that we can dialogue during sex. Rebecca says, sometimes I find that distracting. I find it hugely distracting and a tremendous mood breaker for somebody to start talking during sex. Role play talk, I'm okay with it. I don't really, it's acting. I don't want to act during sex, but that's just my own personal preference. But actually dialoguing, like, hey, let's do this, or hey, let's do that.
Going on vacation next month.
Yeah, or hey, stick it here, or roll over and do this, or hey, what are we going to have for dinner? I don't know. Like, all of that to me is a mood breaker. I
was thinking that. Did you take out the trash?
Yeah. Did you take out the recycling? Did you bring the mail in? All of that stuff is I find it to be a mood breaker. But one thing I can say is, if you are going to attempt to have direct communication, do it in a way that's structured. Whatever's true for you. If you're comfortable talking during sex and orchestrating sex, hey, if that's your bag, then do it. But most people don't find that, especially I think men, when I have a partner who starts to tell me what to do, I just start to shut down. Because I just, I switch to easy listening music in my head. I get insulted, something, and I start to distance. I make up a story that I'm not doing it well enough, whatever. Before I know it, I want to quit on the whole experience. However, Mike and I have what has come to be known as the debrief. We've been together now over 11 years. Is that true? Yeah. God, the days mount up, don't they? We've been together for over 11 years now, over a decade, and we always actually had a what we called a total disclosure agreement. So at some point, whether it was during sex, after sex, or not even something that didn't even have to do with sex, at any point we could turn to each other and say, okay, full disclosure. And that meant that the person had to just say what was on their mind. So full disclosure, how are you feeling about, the idea that we want to move to America? And no matter what you've been saying up until that point, when you hit full disclosure, you have to bring it as, with direct communication, complete honesty, and taking the chance and however the person responds. That eventually set us up for conversations, sexual conversations, because we would, after sex, invariably somebody would turn around and go, okay, full disclosure. And when we had to bring that honest, vulnerable conversation, whether we wanted to or not. But I'd like to think that that's part of the reason that Mike and I have had an active and fulfilling sex life for as long as we have, because I believe that the more we talked about it, the less personal we took it, the easier it was to hear those things. We started to realize it's not personal, it's structural. There's just a structure that is going to work for us. And so if somebody turns around and says, hey, that didn't work for me, it doesn't need to be taken personally. It's just a structural thing. We make an adjustment. What would work for you? Why doesn't it work for you? it sort of works for me. I'd kind of like to keep it if we could. How could we make it work? You know, or it's a flat out no, I don't ever want to do that again. Okay, you know, we have a discussion. Tell me why. What, you know, the more he's my partner, you know, your partner, anybody's partner is willing to open up and explain, like, I don't want to do that ever again. Why? Well, it reminds me of a horrible experience I had as a child. You never told me about this. Well, I don't like to talk about it. Well, then let's talk about it. And before you know it, you know each other better. You're more intimate with each other. Direct communication builds intimacy and it binds you together as a group, as a team. So, you know, a couple is a team. Matter of fact, if a couple isn't a team, there's something wrong. Couple should be a team. They should be working together. That's why they're couple. And so, and, you know, take that as my 2 cents. You know, maybe that's not the way that the world looks at it, but that's definitely the way I look at it. A functional conscious couple can have open communication, direct communication with each other, and they work to become a team. Yeah. Now we've talked about relationships before. And we've talked about the idea that, you know, shared visions in relationships help to build intimacy and connection, and also help to show where the dysfunction shows up in a relationship. And so we turn around and say we can apply the same thing to our sex life as well, and say, you know, knowing where we want to be, if we can get to the point where we can have an honest conversation about where we want to be with each other, what kind of sex works for us, what doesn't work for us, and we're willing to take the chance of how that's going to land with our partners. If we can have that honest conversation and we can take the chance, you know, then we are going to be able to talk about the dysfunction that's playing out as well, right? So it's not just about whether it's working or isn't working, you know, it's about whether it's functional or not. Because again, if we're assuming that our partner has what they need, and they haven't communicated anything different to us, then that isn't functional. If one person's needs are being met and the other person's aren't, that's not functional, that's not couple, that is not intimacy, you know. And so, so, you know, in our case, my husband and myself, you know, we have that, we've aimed to have that conversation. I got to be honest, I kind of hate the debrief, because I think Jessica kind of said, it feels like a mood breaker, even like after.
Well, it depends how long after. You know,
well, that's what I'm saying. Like, to me, we don't do it immediately after, because that was like way too much of a mood breaker. And I'm like, I don't even want to talk about this right now. I haven't had a chance to assimilate. Never
let's
mind.
bask in the bliss we just created.
Yes, exactly. Like, can't I just lay here and, you know, dry off? But but the point is that eventually, like, we put a structure in place so that we could talk about it eventually, not 3 weeks down the line, but well, it was still fresh, but not so fresh that we were still basking in the afterglow. That structure has really served. I don't look forward to it because I'm like, oh, it just feels so clinical, but it serves us. It's continued to serve us for years. And the thing is that I've yet to have a conversation that hasn't netted something useful. I've yet to have a conversation that hasn't brought us closer together, at least in our understanding of each other, right? And how can that be a bad thing? So thoughts, questions, comments?
I would say that introducing this direct communication has made a huge difference in my experience with my husband, because before I just let him take the lead and enjoy the ride, so to speak. And then when I started realizing that usually in our history, whenever there was any kind of affection, it would always lead to sex. And I realized that I wanted to experience affection without it leading to sex. And when I asked for that and got it, the intimacy that we were able to experience as a result of it was off the charts. And it's been a big shift in the way that we communicate with each other and the way that we relate to each other. And another thing what's really fascinating to me is how we could have this incredible intimacy earlier on, because we too have been together for 11 or 12 years. And we would have this beautiful, amazing sex and incredible intimacy. And then we'd go in the kitchen 10 minutes later and have one of the biggest fights we've ever had. And I'm like, where's this guy? Where'd he go? I mean, this was just so beautiful. We were just having this amazing experience. So there was just this, what would happen, you know, where we would have this experience, and then it was like autopilot would come back on, and there would be no vulnerability available to have a discussion in the kitchen. So that was just a fascinating awareness that I had, and that we're not experiencing those anymore because of direct communication and our willingness to keep that light aflame even after, you know, at least for a little while, and not go into an argument once we start talking about what's for dinner or who took the recycling out.
And you make a tremendous point here, because I guarantee you there are plenty of women that are saying that, but there's probably some men in the group that are doing the exact same thing. Sometimes I will shy away from physical intimacy, like from hugs and kisses and things along that line, because I don't want to send the message that I want to have sex.
All affection leads to sex.
Yes, all affection leads to sex. That isn't another agreement a lot of us make, is that it's if we're affectionate, somehow it's going to lead to sex. And unfortunately, and I will own this, that has cut down on the amount of affection that we show each other, because Mike doesn't want to, put me in an awkward position and, and have me get, or worse, have me get angry or irritable with him because he's, making advances and I'm not there. And I shy away from it because I kind of just expect that that's what he wants. I assume that that's what he wants. To the point where, as recently as yesterday, my husband went to hug me, and we were hugging, and I just went, what's happening? What's happening here? He's like, no, I just need a hug. And I was like, oh, okay. Now you can have a hug. As long as it's not going to lead to sex, because I got a million things I got to do right now. And so, sorry, I'll hug you if you need support, not hugging you for a hard on. Sorry. And so, that's where that has actually cut down on the amount of affection we have shared in the past. And, until we put a structure in place that allowed us to just communicate without it having to mean anything. Like my asking and going, hey, what is this? Isn't an insult to him. He's not like, oh, Jesus, I just want a fucking hug. He's like, I just need a hug. And I'm like, okay, of course you get a hug. I just don't want to have sex right now. I got dinner on, can't have sex. Mm-hmm. Rice will burn. Again, look at all the ways it's chipping away at your relationship. to not be able to have direct communication. And so we do talk, when we talk about this subject in other ways, when we talk about leadership or being a pace car in the bedroom, or being a pace car outside of the bedroom, we speak in terms of structure. Yeah, and we say, there's a structure that will support, and that structure isn't there. I can guarantee you that no matter where you are in your sexual journey with your partner, or with even if you're not partnered with other people, you probably do not have a structure that is netting you as much as it could, especially if your structure does not include direct communication, right? So coaches, give me a break. Tell everybody the structure that give an example of a structure that serves when it comes to sex. A structure that serves outside of the bedroom that also would serve inside the bedroom. How's that?
It's not like the creative structure where you go into a vision or a fantasy and imagine the experience you truly want to be having and allow yourself to really drop into that and experience it as if it were really happening. And then you come back into the current reality and realize, okay, where am I now? Maybe look at what's not working to support that to come to fruition, what is working to support that to come to fruition. And then you decide that you want to go to that vision, and you become aware of what's obvious as one way, one step towards getting that. And it's really powerful because in those intimate moments or the non-intimate moments, whether you're in the bedroom or the boardroom, when it becomes obvious to you, because you're connected to that field of infinite intelligence, when you're open and available to receiving and you're using your imagination and curiosity, then you take that step, whatever it is, may not even make sense, but you commit to taking that step and into the unknown and having faith that then the next step will become obvious to you. And eventually you find yourself, because of your own creation and the actions that you took to get there, having a similar experience or one even greater than that you could not have predicted, because you were willing to take those steps and stay in the structure and, keep yourself in check, that you're not acting in fear and that you're actually acting in faith. Because if you start to act in fear, you're not going to be in that same structure, which is the creative structure. You're going to move then into a dysfunctional structure, which is then when your dysfunction is activated, your fears are running the show, and then you're going to either quit or create something you don't want that has no semblance to the vision that you initially, brought up into your imagination.
Yeah.
That's the creative structure. And inevitably you'll get there if you don't quit. It's inevitable that you will have that experience if you don't quit.
As you're saying that, Jessica, like what comes up for me is like, if someone listening or watching this right now has a partner that's dysfunctional, don't let them be the pace car in what you want to experience. Step in and take action and be fucking deliberate. And you'd be surprised how your partner will come meet you where the rubber meets the road.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. That is being the pace car. And you got to want that more than anything else. You got to be committed to it and devoted to having it, and have faith that your partner, will benefit. Your partner will benefit from you taking the lead.
You might be surprised how they show up. And waiting for them to show up in a way, in that condition, like take the lead and see what happens. You'd be surprised.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that same structure is what I attribute the transformation of my marriage from where we were, which was, sitting on a park bench downtown with divorce papers in hand, to realizing we had nothing to lose than to implement the structure and see if we could move it in a completely different direction, in a more healthy and functional direction. And here I am talking live on Facebook about, having the best sex of my life and the greatest relationship I've ever had. And it's all as a result of implementing a structure that supports us getting there, that has supported us getting there.
Yep. Excellent, synopsis of all of that. One thing I will say is, and this is across the board in any relationship that you have, whether it's a sexual relationship, a business relationship, a friendship, it doesn't matter. Relationship with your family, it doesn't matter. If you cannot get to a point where you have a shared vision with that person, then you are going to really, really struggle to grow as a couple, to grow as a team, to grow as a unit, a cohesive unit. If you don't share the vision, if one of you, I'm trying to tone it down because last time I got a lot of flack for how I spoke, and a lot of fucking against the trees stuff.
Well, you just said it, so you can continue.
So one of you wants to fuck against the tree, and the other one is like, absolutely can't bring themselves to do that. And if and part of your vision is to have that type of sexual freedom, that type of daring, where it's out in a little bit more public and not behind closed doors and things like that. If one of you is there and the other one isn't, and you're not, and you can't get there, you can't get to a shared vision of which is basically called a compromise, folks. You can't get to a compromise, you can't get to a shared vision, then that's it. That's it. You're not going to grow as a couple sexually.
Yeah, it's like one person with their GPS dial heading to Alaska and the other one wants to go to Rio de Janeiro.
Yes, you're not going to end up together for sure. Amber?
It does kind of matter where you're coming from in your direct communication. If you're coming from a place of insecurity or a place of lack or a place of proving or posturing, then yes, it is possible for you to be direct about your experience or about your wishes and about your vision and your goal. But it's going to lead to that separation if you're not focused on that connection. So at the end of the day, direct communication in all forms, in all levels, in all areas and arenas is really about connection. It's about connecting on a deeper level. It's about communicating heart to heart, soul to soul, and creating some sort of like shared experience on some level, whether it's meeting your need or meeting someone else's need. It is about that. Otherwise, it is going to cause drifting apart. It is going to be a situation where, oh, you can't do X, Y, and Z fantasy, but then our relationship's over. What's that about? That's not a relationship. That's an ultimatum.
Yeah, amen. Yes. Nobody wins with an ultimatum, by the way. Amber has just hit on, on the true point of this conversation, which is we're using the terms direct communication. We're explaining to you that direct communication is about authenticity and vulnerability. But the real truth about direct communication is it's communication from your heart to the other person's heart. Yeah. If you are not capable of speaking heart to heart on anything, then that whatever subject you cannot speak heart to heart on does not grow. It grows in a dysfunctional way based on a perception that is given from a dysfunctional viewpoint. It is two people speaking ego to ego. Nothing good ever happens when two people are speaking ego to ego. It can be one person speaking from heart and the other and talking directly to somebody else's ego. Nothing changes there either. Nothing changes for the better. And unfortunately, unfortunately, a lot of people you know, are pretty good at giving the illusion that they're speaking from their heart, when in reality, they are speaking from ego. How do we know then if we're in direct communication with somebody? Well, if we know where we both want to end up, if we both agree where we want to end up, this is our location, this is where this is our destination, this is where we want to end up. And we can both acknowledge where we are right now. I'm here, I want it against a tree, you don't want it against a tree. Okay, that's where we are right now. Then we can take steps using direct communication, speaking heart to heart, to get to that point of where we want to be, to get to that destination that we want to go to. If we, and along the way, but you know, what will happen is dysfunction will rear its ugly head. Your dysfunction as a couple will start to show. That's good news. That's good news. Because if you're aiming to be somewhere together, and your dysfunction is playing out, and you can see that it's not going to get you to where you want to go, then you can address that dysfunction. Sometimes we don't know that we're dysfunctional, or we don't know all the various ways in which we're dysfunctional. Sometimes we need an illustration. Sometimes our partners will tell us because they can see with clarity and we can't. But until it becomes illustrated in practical application to the point where we look at it and go, yep, they were right, that's exactly what happened, you know, then it can be addressed if it, you know, if it's in practical application. But if not, it won't get addressed. So so heart to heart, and using a structure, right? To me, as far as I'm concerned, the first obvious action that we would take, you know, to get from where we are to where we want to be, when we're talking about sex, especially, would be direct communication. Speak heart to heart. Now, you know, that's true across the board. Sometimes a little bit difficult to do that in, you know, a corporate setting or whatever, but no excuse for not being able to do it in your own love relationship. Okay. What is it, like 60% of marriages end in divorce these days? You know,
That was more than that.
isn't that amazing? Understand that relationships are built on compatible neuroses. Your dysfunction, now that doesn't mean you have the same neuroses. I'm saying they're compatible, they're complementary to each other, right? So, you know, I have a trust belief, and I get involved with somebody who has a history of cheating. Yeah, you know, they have something in their dysfunction that, you know, makes them go outside of relationships for validation. You know, and I'm looking for proof that people can't be trusted. And so I bring somebody in that helps to illustrate to me that my belief is true. I've proven my belief by bringing in a cheater, right? Now, do I know that they're a cheater? Maybe, maybe not. If I know and I accept them in, it's probably because I'm at that point where I'm unconscious enough and desperate enough to want that relationship that I'm going to ignore the red flags, and we all know we've done it. Because I need that relationship, right? And that relationship and that need, you know, starts out dysfunctionally. In the Course in Miracles, they say that every relationship starts out unholy, and your job is to turn it holy. I would say every relationship starts out dysfunctional, and our job is to turn it into something functional. Because we get together for all the wrong reasons. And we all kind of know that, right? But in order to you know, turn that into something functional, we have to work at that. We have to both have the desire to turn it into something functional, We have to both be willing to talk about where we are, and we have to both be willing to take steps to make it more functional. Direct communication, one of the key components to that entire thing. Anybody?
I had a client tell me recently, years and years ago, 4 evidences that were so clear within weeks of meeting her now husband, and they have a kid together. 4 instances that she was like, ignore it, ignore it, ignore it, ignore it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not uncommon.
No, it's not uncommon at all. I mean, we do it quite frequently. We ignore, you know, the red flags. Somehow we tell ourselves we'll be different. They'll love us enough that this won't be a problem or whatever. And it always is.
If I can get this one to love me, then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you know, yeah. Of course, you know, making it about myself and be, you know, and whether or not I'm, you know, I can be good enough in order to, you know, to be loved by this person or to change this person. Look, people don't change unless they commit to doing it. I've been coaching for a long time, and I can assure you that people don't change unless they're committed to changing.
Mark, that plays beautifully into the question from Rebecca about at what point do you give up on that relationship, you know?
Well, okay. I mean, yeah, we're drifting a little out of the sex talk, but okay. That's a little bit like how long is a piece of string, right? I don't, you know, there's no set point for when you get out of a relationship. If you work with me and you're working to be the pace car in your relationship, you're working to be the most conscious person in the relationship. If you're involved with somebody who's unconscious, people say to me all the time, I just want out. I just want out. Now that I'm getting more conscious, now that I understand more, I don't believe I should be with this person. Anybody who works with me knows that that is not an excuse to quit on a relationship. You can do what you want when you're working with me. It's your life, but I'm never going to condone somebody quitting on a relationship. Simply because their partner's unconscious. Most people are unconscious. That's not permission to quit on your relationship. I would say that if your partner can't join you in a shared vision, well, that's a pretty good indicator that you're not going to end up at the same place. You know, if every couple or every person I've ever worked with that's been part of a couple that couldn't get behind a shared vision for the life they wanted to have with each other is no longer together. Sorry, but that's the truth. If you're not working on you know, arriving at the same destination, then you're not going to arrive at the same destination. You're going to go to different locations, right? You're going to end up, as you know, as Jessica said, one of you is going to be in Alaska and the other one's going to be in Rio. You know, but as to when it's the right time to quit, here's what I have always said. It's always been my truth, and I know people on the panel will back me up on this as their truth as well. When you are working to be a better version of yourself, when you're working to be a more conscious version of yourself, when you are willing to have shared visions, to work toward those visions, to use direct communication, and to use all the other skills that we teach, when you're willing to do that, you will elevate in consciousness. And the people around you, a lot of them will go away. Sad, but it's true. A lot of the people that are around you right now are feeding off of your energy. They're feeding off of the dysfunctional energy in the relationship. They know how to pull your strings and you know, work you like a little puppet and get the energy that they want from you. Whether this is an intimate relationship or a friendship or a familial relationship, it doesn't matter. everybody is working to get your energy. And unconscious people do it in some pretty nasty unconscious ways. They lie, they misdirect, they extort, they bully, whatever.
Confused.
They can get your energy, However, and they come to you because, again, you have compatible neuroses, and they know that what your energy tastes like. They see people like, they know what energy they want. They know what flavor they're looking for. How many of us don't know what food we like? You know, they know energetically what food they like, and they recognize it, and they come after you for it. And as an unconscious person, you can end up a victim to that. You can end up on the wrong end of that, losing energy to somebody who is highly, highly dysfunctional. But if you're working to be a better version of yourself, if you're working to be more conscious, if you're not willing to overlook the red flags anymore, if you're not willing to be in a relationship that doesn't have direct communication, if you're not willing to be in a relationship with somebody who isn't working towards the same end result that you're working towards, then yeah, you don't have to quit, because they will. They'll quit. The minute you become the pace car in the relationship, and you hold a vibration that's high and functional and conscious, they will either come up to that vibration and meet you as close to that vibration as they possibly can, or they'll fuck off. Either way, you can't lose. Yeah. So
that's a really good point, about people will drop out of your life, or you'll just, you know, spend less and less time with them. But the reverse is also true.
yes.
As I have continued on this journey and this path, and especially, you know, since joining the Creative Self Mastery group and working on the creative structure, direct communication, looking really at how your beliefs and your stories create your reality, I'm now having these conversations with my friends and family, like with people that I would never in my whole entire life think that they would get on board with. And with my many years of manifesting and energy work and all of the different spiritual paths that I've been on, they were very, you know, not open to that at all. That was just some bunch of like weird woo-woo stuff. But now all of a sudden, talking about taking an accountability for your thoughts and how your thoughts and actions and emotions are playing out in your world, like those conversations are starting to happen. And it's not because I'm forcing them. They're coming to me and I'm just like, what is happening? But just naturally being a pace car and holding your focus on creating that connection and on having those direct experiences and knowing where you want to go, people will start to rise up and start to meet you there. So you can absolutely expect that, as well as the people who aren't interested will fall away.
Absolutely. The people who, you know, who you matter to the most are going to do their level best to come up to meet you as close to your vibration as possible. It won't be a conscious thing. It will just be that we influence each other unconsciously all the time. And, you know, because you have a high functional conscious vibration, you know, people, and it's strong, people will, you know, will naturally start to rise to that. The people around you, that you know, they may not even actively want to be better versions of themselves, but they may just find themselves being better versions of themselves around you. Yeah. And you guys have heard me say it a million times, the one with the biggest heart on for it wins. So if you're up here and you're holding your vibration strong and you're conscious and you're functional and you're you know, using all of your tools in order to master yourself, then a lot of people are going to just come up to that vibration when they're around you. How many times, if you want proof of this, how many times have you walked into a room feeling really good and have somebody, and next thing you know, you're in a tremendous argument. Jessica just talked about it earlier, saying, you know, once, you know, we used to go from having great sex and instantly, you know, within minutes end up in an argument. what happened? I'll guarantee you I can tell you what happened. One of them went in to a shitty vibration because they were second guessing themselves, because they were having an inner dialogue with themselves. And they got so worked up in their brain that they started to have the strongest vibration. It doesn't matter it's the most functional vibration. I never said that. I said the strongest vibration is going to win. And so if you're up here like, yeah, I just had great sex and I feel great and woo woo wah, and the other person turns around and hits you with some really seriously dysfunctional energy, you're going to plummet, unless, you catch yourself. If conscious people, they say, oh, I feel the urge to plummet here. I'm going to hold my vibration. I'm going to expect them to come up. And so, but likewise, just so we're clear, likewise, when you raise that vibration, you will also, in addition to losing people along the way, and I know it sounds awful, but trust me, I don't know anybody who's ever thought it wasn't a blessing.
Well, it's like a magnet. We're either going to repel or we're going to attract. And as we ascend, those numbers are going to become really obvious. Who's being attracted to you in your new energy and who's repelled by your new energy, because some people don't like to be in a powerful, strong, high vibrational, positive energy.
No, exactly.
They can't.
Victims don't like to be around conscious people because they don't get to feed on conscious people's energy, because conscious people don't allow victims to feed on them. It's that simple.
I literally thought when I first was struggling with, holding my vibration, self-mastery, really truly wanting to be the most conscious, strongest vibration in the room, I literally thought I was going to lose all of my friends and lose all of my family and just be kind of isolated and alone and just searching for my people somewhere, who can I connect with? And that was not the case at all. My experience was not that. It happened very gradually and very naturally, and it's still evolving. So, so if you're noticing a fear around that at all, oh my goodness, can I really be direct and speak my truth and share my truth and have direct communication and work toward moving toward the vision that I want to create? You can, and it might not necessarily mean that all of a sudden you're going to be all by yourself and your relationships fall apart. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Life is very graceful, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's a gradual. Look, as I said, it's gentle, it's gradual, and I'm telling you that I've never had anybody turn around and go, oh, it was really sad to see them go.
No.
It might have been a really close friend at one point. I had one of my best friends, when I was an addict, is an addict. And they were secretly addicted. I was, it was pretty obvious I was addicted. They were secretly addicted. And it was one of my closest and dearest friends. And then I cleaned up my act, and still it was secret, but I could tell that something was changing. And then the whole thing came to light, and their addiction became obvious. And they went into recovery and all of that. And I can just tell you that the energy that they went into recovery with was still kind of down here. I was here saying, I'm perfectly willing to support you. I want to support you, but you can't, but you have to be honest with me. I won't tolerate lying. And they said, yes, yes, yes. But eventually I started to get things like, it's my addiction. I don't need to talk about it with anybody. Okay. From best friend to, I can't talk about my addiction with you. When we've been talking about it for years, it was just that I was up here, they had started to come up to that vibration, and then they got back to the same people, places, and things in their lives, and that was it. If you don't change the people, places, and things, your vibration doesn't change. Yeah, we're friends. I still love that person. I'll always love them, but we have nothing we interact hardly ever. There's just nothing really binding us anymore. Was it painful to lose that person? Yes, but it wasn't like it was a bad thing. That person doesn't fit into my life anymore. I don't vibrate at the level of addict. And so they don't want to be around me, and no offense, I don't want to be around them. Where our energy that we used to exchange so evenly, so willingly, we're not willing to exchange with each other anymore because his tastes different to me and mine tastes different to him. Cool. Linda, it occurs to me that there was something you wanted to say and I completely forgot to get back to you. Is it still relevant?
No, I was just, I had just read Rebecca's post and thought I would mention that, but we addressed it already, so I'm good.
Good, all right, great. Okay, so that's where we are today. We've looked at some of the reasons as to why, it's so difficult to talk about sex. We've looked at some of the reasons why it's so beneficial to talk about sex. We've given you some ideas around ways to make that easier, and also some structures. And we never make decisions in advance. We always sit with what's true. So we are going to sit with what's true. And if we do decide to do another talk on being the pace car in the bedroom, more than likely, I will say that it's going to be a talk about structure. Because here's the thing. People turn around and say all the time, oh, it's so unfair, he cheated on me. And what a scumbag for doing that. And I turn around and say to them, if the relationship wasn't structured to allow for cheating, then it would not happen, right? This is one of my favorite, demonstrations is about structure. This is a cup designed to hold liquid, right? That's what it's structured to do. As long as it's holding liquid, as long as you're pouring liquid into it, it's doing exactly what it's designed to do. You try and use it as a parachute and you're going to die. It's not structured to do that. If your relationship isn't structured to allow for cheating, if your relationship isn't structured to allow for covert conversations, inner dialogue, if your relationship is structured to allow, for communication that isn't direct, then it's going to end up with something along the lines of cheating, divorcing, or something along that lines. The dysfunction will come out, and not in a way that can be corrected. It will come out in a dysfunctional, unhealthy way. If it's structured to allow for cheating, divorce, drifting apart from each other, aloof behavior, codependent.
Abuse.
What was that?
Abuse.
Abuse, yeah. If it's structured to allow for abuse, if it's structured to allow for addiction, then that's exactly what it's going to do. If it's not structured to allow for addiction, abuse, codependence, it won't exist, because you can't turn a cup into a parachute. If you don't want these things to be part of your relationship, you have to change the structure of your relationship. And direct communication is just one tool that we offer people as a way to change the structure of their relationship. So in the event that we decide to do a third episode on this, that's what we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about the restructuring of a relationship, structuring a relationship to be, for it to allow for the things you want to experience, and for it to not really have the space for the things you don't want to experience. one of the things we don't want to experience in relationships is bad sex. We've given you some options now for how you can restructure your relationship to have the sex get better. And join us again, and you'll get some more information on not only the things that will make life better in the bedroom, but skills that will allow you to be a functional, conscious leader in your bedroom, in your relationships, in your community, in the boardroom, wherever. Yeah. Because the little spoiler alert that Amber put out earlier, the way you do your relationships, the way you do your sex relationship is the way you do all your relationships, right? If you are not capable of discussing, visioning, restructuring in the bedroom, you're not capable of doing it anywhere else. I mean, that's not necessarily accurate. You may be capable of it, but you're not likely to do it. If you're not willing to restructure in your bedroom, chances are you're not going to have the skill set that will allow you to restructure it in other aspects.
There may be other areas in your life where you're going unconscious, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the bottom line is that if you don't have a structure that allows for a relationship to be conscious and functional, then it's not going to be. So if there's any aspect of your relationship that isn't working, that's where you want to look. That's what you want to look at. But if it's not working, you're going to have to be able to have an idea of where you want it to, what you want it to look like when it is working, and an honest conversation with the people in your relationships about where you are and where they are, and then an agreement that you will work together to get to where you want to be. And direct communication allows you, when you speak heart to heart with somebody, you can't be anywhere but in your true essence when you're speaking heart to heart. So you can't play out your dysfunction when you're speaking heart to heart. That's why we advocate so readily, so vehemently for direct communication. Because what is it? It's two people acknowledging that there is no actual separation between them, that they are two gods loving each other. They are in essence one being, because we are. And there's no separation between us. That's an illusion. But it's direct communication, heart to heart. Amber, I always steal Amber's line. You can't occupy two spaces at the same time. You can't be in your heart space and be in your ego at the same time. So you really want to move things in the right direction, start thinking about the benefits of direct communication and then applying them in the bedroom and beyond. And I think that'll probably do it for today. Yeah.
So for anybody who's new to listening to us here at Creative Self Mastery, this is just a taste of what we do. We essentially help teach the creative structure, incorporating self-mastery into it so that you can take this into all areas of your life, including the bedroom, and powerfully create and lead functionally a conscious life. So if you're looking to work with one of us or to connect on any level, we've got our Facebook group. You can always reach out to Mark DeFrancia. And we're so grateful to have you here. Very, very grateful.
Yeah, and think about looking up the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, share it with other people. We have an end result here. We're on a mission to elevate the consciousness of the planet. And if we have to do that one person at a time, then we will. But it'd be better if you guys were liking what you were hearing, if you were sharing it with other people. And you can find us at creativeselfmastery.com. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and as I said, on any of the major podcast platforms.
So the podcast is called Being the Pace Car. You can search Creative Self Mastery Being the Pace Car, and you'll be able to find it on all major platforms. Yeah, we had a question about that, so I just wanted to make sure that gets addressed.
Yep. How do you influence structure? Okay, well, that's a question for another day. But we're gonna knock it on the head today. We're at the 2-hour mark, and that's usually more than enough for people. So thanks for joining us. I hope we'll see you in well, actually, I'm not gonna say. I look forward to seeing you at another one of our conversations. We do these fairly regularly, and so it won't be long before we have another one. But if you want something a little bit more consistent, you can look up the Inner Circle group as well. We do have a Creative Self-Mastery Inner Circle group where we gather every week and have discussions just like this one. That's the most selling I think I've ever done on these, and it's probably the most I ever will do on these. So thanks for your patience, but we've got all these new platforms and we just wanted to get them out there so everybody knew how to find us. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for attending today. We'll look forward to seeing you again. Go out there, and do your best to lead consciously, functionally, and from the heart. Yeah. On behalf of myself and everyone from Creative Self-Mastery, it's been an honor to be able to bring this to you today. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.